So welcome back to visualizing data using SPSS. When you open SPSS, the thing that you'll notice is that you get to choose what data file you want to use. And often you'll have a list under recent files of the different data sets that you've been using. Today we're just going to use a new data set, and it starts out just by being empty. So click on New Data Set and then OK. And so our data set is just a blank, doesn't have any variables in it. And so I was saying that when you get to the point where you're doing data entry, SPSS will actually remind you that you need to do these both things. So you need to enter the variables and you need to enter the data. And what you'll notice down at the bottom is you have two tabs. In a PC, they're off to the left-hand side, but they say exactly the same thing, data view and variable view. So if we click on variable view, it shows us all different kinds of characteristics of each of our variables. Under data view, this is what we typically think of as our spreadsheet of data. And so let's go ahead and enter that data that we have collected, the one that includes age, happiness, and born. And so I'm going to go ahead and go to variable view. That's where I'm going to start. And in variable view, I'm going to enter my three variables as these top three lines, line 1, 2, and 3, and I will insert all of the different features of those particular variables. So the place I'm going to start is under label, and my first variable is what is your current age? And I'm just going to type that in, what is your current age, question mark, and then I'm going to add at the end of it parentheses, years. You'll see in a minute why I do this. This is my variable as it was written in the questionnaire. The second thing then that I need to do is I need to choose out of that a shorter name, and that's what name is. Label is a longer description of that particular variable. Name is shorter, and there are some specific things about name that you would want to know. First of all, you can't include any spaces or special characters. It just has to be one long slew of letters, and can be numbers too. So I'm just going to put age. So it might be longer than that. In the olden days, name was limited to 8 characters, and so you would end up with some of these really kind of quirky names that were trying to capture blood pressure at the beginning of the study versus 6 weeks versus 12 weeks. So we would have all these funny combinations of letters and numbers that meant a specific thing. Now the name can be a little bit longer, but I would encourage you to keep it pretty short because that's the variables that you'll be selecting from a list often. The next thing that we need to do with age is we need to think about how many decimal places we need. Now with age, since people are reporting their age in years, usually they'll report it in full years, and so we can just leave this at 0 decimal places. On the other hand, if we have a continuous variable that we measure to the tenths, let's say we measure somebody's weight in kilograms to the tenth, then we would need to include 1 decimal place here so that our data actually shows that decimal place. Or if we capture it to the 100th, then we would need to have 2 decimal places, or the 1000th. Sometimes blood values include more decimal places. So we just need to include the right number of decimal places, and that number can go up and down for these variables that are scale, like age is. The next thing that we'd like to look at is values and missing. Values specifically for scale variables is almost always, we just leave it alone. We just leave it at none. However, if there were any missing values for variables for this particular, or values for this particular variable, then we would want to figure out how to code those. Now, 0 is actually a possible age, unless in our data set we only captured people that were say teenagers and above, then we could use 0. But 0 could be the correct answer for a particular person if age goes all the way from 0 up until kind of however old. So missing, we would need to code as something else. Often for age, missing is coded, and so I clicked on that particular cell and it brought up these little 3 dots. So I'm going to click on the 3 dots, and a lot of times for age, missing is coded as 99. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. Now the problem with using 99 as your missing value for age is that although it is rare, it's possible for somebody to actually be 99 years old. And so in that case, we would need to use some other number like 999 as our missing variable. And so we could make that be our missing. In this data set, we do not have any missing variables, so we're good. The last thing that I would like for you to do is here under Measure, go ahead and click on where it says Unknown, and you'll have the option of choosing one of these 3 levels of measurement: nominal, ordinal, or scale. And since age is measured in years, this is going to be a scale variable, and you'll see that it shows up there. So let's go ahead and enter our last 2 variables. I'm going to just do them mostly without commentary, and you can follow along or zoom ahead. And here I'm naming this happy. I know that it's a categorical variable, and so I'm not going to need any decimal places. What I'm going to probably end up doing with happy is I'm going to classify the very happy as a 1, the pretty happy as a 2, and a not too happy as a 3. So I would go into my data collection and I would make sure and make a note of that. Now the thing about happy is that now that I do have these 1s and 2s and 3s, I have to tell the computer what those are going to be. And so let's say I have my 1 be very happy, and then I click Add. 2 is pretty happy, click Add. 3 is not too happy, and click Add. You can also use your tab if you prefer to use a tab. And what you'll notice now is that this cell under values for happy actually has something in it. Instead of saying none, it classifies those categories. And the value in doing this is that as soon as I make some kind of a graph, it will label those categories. Instead of labeling them 1, 2, 3, it's going to label them with their actual descriptor. Now under happiness, if I have 1, 2, and 3 as my only possible choices, then missing could be 0. So I'm going to go ahead and put a 0 in here. Even though for my particular data set there were no missing values, I'm going to go ahead and put that in anyway. Now the last thing that I want to do is here under Measure. So I want to tell the computer that this is an ordinal variable. You'll notice that it uses these little pictures to kind of help you out, help remind you. Scale is like a little ruler, ordinal is low, medium, high, and then we're going to have a chance here to enter in a nominal variable. I'm going to add in where were you born? And we have those 4 answer choices. Let's skip over here to the left, and I'm going to put in born. I'm just going to abbreviate. And for decimal places, again, I don't need any. And under values, I do have to put those in again, just like I did for the other ones. So the value 1, I'm going to code as Western US, although it could be that I could code them some other way. 2 will be Central US. I tend to like things to go left to right. 3 will be Eastern US, and 4 will be other. And click OK, and you'll notice now those are in that box. For missing, again, I'm going to use a 0 anytime I have a missing variable. So let's go ahead and say 0 is missing, and I need to tell the computer that this is a nominal variable. So I have a scale, an ordinal, and a nominal, and now we're going to have a chance to kind of practice with these. So let's go ahead and go to Data View. And now you can see not only do I have 1 through however many cases I happen to collect in my data collection, I also have age, happy, and born as 3 columns. And so I can just follow along in my data collection and enter these in. I'm just going to enter them by typing them in. You can also copy and paste. That would probably be more accurate. A lot of times we have study instruments like Microsoft Access can be a data collection, a way of collecting data. 33, 29, 64, 34, and 72. I've known people who have been using SPSS for a really, really long time. They always opened their data and there it was sitting in the computer. And they did not know that they could literally click on a cell and just type it in. So I called very happy a 1. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in here. I called pretty happy a 2, not too happy a 3. Then I have some very happies, a pretty happy. So those are my codes. Obviously, you would not want to do that for a really large data set. You would want to have something else that would be a little bit more secure or for sure. So here we have the Eastern US is a 3, Central is a 2, Western is 1, Western, Western. I'm going to make 4 as an other, Central, Western, Western, Central. And here we have missing. For person number 11 under born, remember how I said 0 is going to be a missing? And then if I put in Western for my last one. Now if you notice, if I delete that and I just leave it blank, it leaves a little period in there, like a decimal point. It's cleaner to actually code them as something, so I'm going to put the 0 back in. But if you ever see a data set and there are dots inside instead of the numbers or codes that belong there, just know that there just wasn't anything to enter in. That's another way of saying missing is by having a dot. So now I have entered both my variable view. I've coded all of the things that I need to code. I've entered my data under data view, and this is all in one place. The other thing that I'd like to show you is something called the output viewer. And so in SPSS, there are actually these 2 programs essentially that are open at the same time, and they're busy talking to each other. So here, let me make sure that I can see my other one. Here's my output viewer, and here's my data editor. And the way you can tell them apart is up here at the top, the one that has the grid and all the data in it says data editor over here on the right, and the one that is the output viewer says output statistics viewer on it. It used to say output viewer over here on the left, so I am in the habit of calling it an output viewer. But this is your output. And you'll notice that there is something that says new file, data set, window front. Basically, this is all the code that's happening and it's running in the background. As I opened SPSS as a computer program, this was the code that made the computer open that computer program. So as we go through and we make these graphs, you're going to see more code show up in that output viewer. So we've entered the data, and now we're ready to create and interpret the graphs. So the first thing that we need to do is look at each variable, decide its level of measurement, and then therefore decide what kind of graph we're going to make. Remember how we talked about you can't do anything in statistics unless you know those levels of measurement. And so in this particular case, we actually entered them in under our variable view. We said that age is scale, happy is ordinal, and born is nominal. So if you put those levels of measurement in, then you would be able to then extrapolate to what kind of graph. And we know that a scale variable either uses a histogram or a stem and leaf plot, and that both ordinal and nominal variables use bar charts and pie graphs. And so we're going to make some graphs for each of these, and I'll show you how to make all of those. For the histograms, bar graphs and pie graphs, that's going to be under something called Graphs Chart Builder. And so up here at the top, you're going to have a menu Most of the time when we're using SPSS, we're going to be in either Analyze or Graphs. So those are the two main locations that we will be. We also use some Transform, some of the file features, but primarily Graphs and Analyze. So here we are under Graphs, Chart Builder, and it opens a window that is literally a chart builder. Let me scoot it over so you can see this right-hand side. And this is called the chart preview area. And we're going to build a chart in this little landing pad right here. And so if we're starting off with age, we want to make a histogram. So we look down here at our list of all the possible things that we can make. And here's histogram about 2/3 of the way down on the left. It pulls up a variety of different kinds of histograms. You can see that you have some horizontal ones, some that are polygons where it connects so it creates an area. There are stacked ones, and here's the basic, most fundamental histogram here on the left. So I'm going to go ahead and click and hold with the left click on my mouse, and I'm going to drag that up here onto my chart preview area. And you'll see it's trying to show you what that's going to look like once you get done. So there's a start. And then I'm going to take my what is your current age, and I'm going to drag, so again left click and hold, and then drag that variable, come here, drag that variable down here to the x-axis. Now, this is example data. This is not what your histogram is going to look like. It's just guessing because it really didn't look at your whole entire data set to create this. But it's telling us that it's going to make a histogram of what is your current age in years. So I'm going to just go ahead and say, okay, sounds like a good plan to me. And remember how I said that the computer will show you all of the code that's running in the background? Did you notice how under New File and Dataset Name, all this other stuff showed up? It's telling you that it's using the chart builder to create a graph. And so all the rest of this is just all of the other code that helps the computer know what to do when you click on those things. So here's the graph that it made. It gave me what is your current age in years across the bottom. It lumped them into 10-year intervals. And so we have here's age 20, 40, 60, 80. And it doesn't look very much like a normal curve. That's okay. There's sort of a small number of people in this particular data set, so we wouldn't really expect it to. So there's my histogram, and that's how you create a histogram. So basically graphs, chart builder, and then build that histogram in the chart preview area. The next thing that we want to make for that continuous variable age is we'd like to make a stem and leaf plot. And I'd like to point out that stem and leaf plots are really great for kind of learning how statistics work, but usually most statisticians don't show the data using a stem and leaf plot just because they are quite cumbersome. But I'll show you how to make it anyway. So in order to make a stem and leaf plot, it happens to not be under graphs because it's made out of numbers. And so we need to go to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, Explore. You'll notice it has a little picture there. It's trying to help you out. So Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, Explore. And then under Plots, you'll notice that Stem and Leaf is already selected. Now the nice thing about doing it this way is that we can actually make a stem and leaf plot and a histogram at the same time. So I'm going to go ahead and leave stem and leaf plot clicked. I usually don't, but for now we'll allow the computer to make that. And then here we're going to make a histogram. So we're going to end up making the same histogram over again. So I'll click on Continue, and then all I want is plots. I don't want to make all the statistics that go with it, but I do need to tell the computer what am I going to make a plot of. So here's my list of all my variables over here on the left-hand side. I'm going to highlight the what is your current age, click on the arrow and put that variable under dependent list. Now I have the plots selected, plots here, and then I can just hit the button that says OK. And as you watch, here's the code that created this stem and leaf and histogram of the variable age. And here's my histogram, which looks exactly like the one we already created, and here's my stem and leaf plot. Now, the computer created a stem and leaf plot that has a stem width of 100, so everything is under the leaves. So this doesn't seem like a very helpful stem and leaf plot, and people don't use them very much anyway. So, but now you know how to create them if you want to. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make some graphs of happy. So let's go to graphs again, chart builder, and we're going to bring up that chart preview area, and I'm going to reset it just to clear everything out. The first graph I'm going to make is a bar graph, and I want you to watch this left-hand corner that is the picture of the simple histogram. When I click on bar, you'll notice that it still has bars, but it has little spaces in between, and that is your clue that this is not necessarily a continuous variable across the bottom here. So I'm going to take that simple bar graph and I'm going to drag it, so left click and drag it up here to my chart preview area. And here's my happiness variable. I'm going to also left click and drag that down here to my x-axis. And you'll notice all of a sudden over here on the left hand side it popped up as a count. So we're making a frequency graph of happiness. And you'll notice it put in very happy, pretty happy, and not too happy. It's guessing in terms of the data itself, but sometimes it looks really different than what your data actually shows because it just pulls that information from a few cases. So now that this is built in my chart preview area, I'm going to click on OK. And here's my bar graph in general. How happy are you? So there it is. It looks like I have 7 people. If I follow this across, here I have 2, 4, 6, 7 who are very happy. I have 3 that are pretty happy and 2 that are not too happy. And you'll notice that it put my question right in here and also my variable labels, the very happy, pretty happy, and not too happy. And right above it, again, is my chart builder, the code, the syntax that told the computer exactly how to create that. So that's all about making a bar graph. Next, I'm going to go back to chart builder and I'm going to make a pie graph. So I can click on my pie graph and see how here's my pie. I'm going to drag that up here into my chart preview area. And it left the in general, how happy are you, right there for me. So that was kind of nice. I'm going to click on OK. And here is a pie graph of happiness. Now, remember how we talked a little bit about the difference between them? The bar graph shows that very happy is taller than the other two and how much taller it is. The pie graph, on the other hand, shows the proportion of the whole. And so while it may not be super obvious, especially when you get larger numbers, that the green pie shape is larger than the not too happy pie shape, you can see on here even small differences of one being taller than the other. And similarly, it might not be super obvious that very happy is more than half, especially if you have several columns, several bars. But here on the pie graph, you can see that it starts at the 12 o'clock and it goes past 6 o'clock, so that it's more than half is in that particular group or category. So the pie graph and the bar graph are just used for different things, and neither one of them is necessarily wrong. It just depends on what kind of research question you want to answer. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for born, and we can do these pretty quickly. Here I'm going to reset and take my pie back. Where were you born? I'll put that here, and it's by count. So here's a pie graph of born, Western, Central, Eastern, and other. And then if I were to make a bar graph of the same thing, I could just take my bar graph and drag it on up there, and it leaves the where were you born, and I'm going to click OK. And here's my bar graph. So that is a quick overview of SPSS in terms of creating these visualization graphs for us. The last thing that you need to know about SPSS is that saving is not always intuitive. I cannot tell you how many times somebody came to me and they had spent a long time entering a whole bunch of data into a data view and variable view. They'd coded everything. That takes time. The more variables you have and the newer you are at it, the more time it takes. And they would tell me that they saved their data. See how here's the little save button? let's say I'm going to save it. And I generally save this. Sure, that's a good place. I'm going to give it a name. I have a standard kind of naming way that I do things. So 2016, October, today is the 16th, and I'm going to call it output, and then I also give it a name, such as measurement and graphs. So that I know that this is my output from that particular day. And you can even look up here at the top, it says Output Statistics Viewer. So you could think of it as your output viewer. So here I'm going to click Save. Oh, whoops. Probably doesn't want me to have that vertical line. Do a dash instead. Okay, so then up here at the top, I have measurement and graphs. Here's my name instead of just saying Untitled, but it's still my output viewer. So I've saved my output. If I ever want to come back to it, I can see the code, I can see all the graphs, I can see everything that I did today is this kind of like a record of all of my information. If I were to close SPSS right now, my data set is not saved. Notice how it says Untitled SPSS Data Editor. And the Save button on my actual data editor is not grayed out like it is here. When I save it, it knows that it has the most recent copy. So this happens all the time where somebody says, I spent all this time and then I went back to look for it and it was gone. It wasn't there. And the reason for that is because they didn't save it. They saved the output viewer but not the data. There essentially are two separate programs that are open at the same time, and they're busy talking to each other while you're running all these analyses, but saving one of them does not automatically save the other one. So let's go ahead and save this one too. I'm going to save it to essentially the same place, and I'm going to call it the same thing, 2016, October 16, only this time I'm going to call it data, because this is my data viewer. And I'm going to name it Measurement and Graphs again and click Save. And notice how at the top it changed the name of the document so that now it's named that particular thing. And the little Save button shows that there's nothing new. If I were to go in and change something, then I would have something new and I would have to hit Save again. So that concludes this overview of how to use SPSS to create these visualizing data graphs.